Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks. After trade talks with the US president, China sends its delegation to Europe. What is the visit about and what are the immediate effects of the Trump-Xi meeting? To talk about it, we're joined by Professor François Godement, Special Advisor at Institut Montaigne. Good afternoon, Professor.
Good afternoon.
So, first of all, Donald Trump returns victorious from South Korea, but is this also good news for Europe?
Well, look, it could have been worse on both sides. Let's say if Donald Trump drops all trade tariffs and all limits to Chinese exports, Europe doesn't have the power or the potential by itself to withstand what you could call a Chinese goods tsunami. And on the other hand, if he had imposed, as he threatened to do before November 1st, a 100% increase in tariff, which would bring overall tariffs up to 157%, Europe would have had no other choice but to try and match these tariffs. Otherwise, it would be the market of last resort. So, as much as this has not involved European decisions, there could have been far worse outcomes. That's the way I would put it.
One of the main topics of the meeting's agenda was rare earth minerals issue. Now, how crucial are those minerals for both the US and Europe?
They are absolutely crucial to anything that relies on the digital economy. Because of chips, because of components inside many of the fixtures that we need, including household appliances today, cars. It's crucial for the weapons industry. An F-35 US fighter needs about 450 kilos of rare earth. A nuclear sub, Virginia class, I'm reliably told, needs almost 5 tons, 4.5 tons of rare earths, and these are huge amounts. So the threat by China to blockade rare earth export is tantamount, to a move for deterrence.
I see. So it was, you can call it like an entry to a war, right? Because if you block the other party from from defending itself, basically, as you said, that F-35s need rare earth minerals, that's like a preparation for war.
That, of course, describes the dependency that we have all fallen in to critical materials, of which either China owns them by mining them somewhere, or it owns them by refining them on its territory. So this is serious. But I would call it mutual deterrence in the trade area rather than a preparation for a war. I think China signaled to Donald Trump that his 157% tariff was tantamount to strangling the Chinese economy, and that would cause them to retaliate with the rare earth blockade. They have bear in mind, however, that the agreement is not signed. We have something that looks like a deal, feels like a deal, but it's not signed. And China has only undertaken in very vague terms to pause and to be smoother in the implementation of what it's doing about rare earth. So China hasn't given up its deterrent in that category.
I see. Let's quote now Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. We will speed up work on critical raw materials partnerships with countries like Ukraine and Australia, Canada, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Chile or Greenland. That's what she said last Saturday. Now, is Europe really that fully dependent on China in this regard?
Completely. China refines 90% of rare earth in the world. And what's worse, it has some control on the technology and process, which not anybody is able to match in some categories. So it will be a long-drawn effort, not so much to find mines where you could if you're ready to exploit it, take out rare earths somewhere else, but to refine them. The most optimistic estimates is that Europe would need at least 3, probably 5 years to not so much as do away with Chinese rare earths, but perhaps counterbalance or mix our inputs to achieve some degree of independence.
So what will the Chinese delegation try to achieve tomorrow in Europe, apart from trying to convince the European Commission that they should stick to Chinese rare earth minerals?
I think they have other goals. They're going to have to resist the pressure of the EU, asking them to lessen or stop their support to Russia in its war against Ukraine. It's the highest item on the EU's list, and so far, China has not given any sign that it might want to give in. It's going to want to stop the move in defensive economic strategy by Europeans. For example, the requirements that are being talked about for investment by China on joint ventures, the requirements on localization in Europe, eventually on technology transfer. It is going to plead for free trade, even if it doesn't fully practice free trade by itself, of course. And it might even test the water to see if there is some potential for disalignment with the United States in some area, for being critical. I assume that they will use their potential in green transition technologies to try and woo the Europeans.
Oh, I see. So that's the Chinese card to play tomorrow. But what can Europeans do to put some pressure on Beijing to stop it financing Putin's war in Ukraine?
I don't think we have direct leverage. The direct leverage would be more direct military involvement, of course, on the ground and from Ukraine onto Russia. And that's probably not something that Europeans are going to consider in anything but a very minimal sense. Where Europe has leverage is in the barriers it might put up to Chinese exports in some areas. And that's even more than the barriers to investment, because China is actually no longer investing huge sums in Europe. There are less strategic projects by the Chinese in Europe. They're concentrated essentially in areas where China knows it has to bypass export restrictions. So this is the present leverage. I don't think we have the leverage that Trump has, and which is, by the way, criticized in the US, which is, as he has done in Seoul today, hinting that he will drop export restrictions on most semiconductors, on most chips. We don't have the same leeway in Europe, and we would be probably caught by the US itself, by the Trump administration, which is going to exercise pressure on third countries not to bypass its own restriction. So I think the European objectives by nature have to be limited.
I see. Now, I'm talking about Europe not without a reason, because somehow, Ukraine not without a reason, because somehow Ukraine was on the talks agenda, but there was nothing on Taiwan. What's going on there?
That's the one thing where apparently, and according to his own comments after the meeting, Donald Trump has resisted what was rumored to be Chinese pressure. There was a rumor of Chinese pressure to obtain a declaration from the US committing to criticize anything that looked like independence from Taiwan. So to desist from the strategic and diplomatic ambiguity that the US has practiced, and apparently, if we believe Donald Trump's comments, nothing was said on the issue. On Ukraine, I would hasten to add that it's perfectly ambiguous, because on the one hand, Donald Trump has said that he was hoping for China to play some role in helping to resolve the conflict, but he hasn't said how. Would it be with a negotiating or mediating role? Would it be by direct pressure on Russia? And on the other hand, he's also issued a comment where he says neither the US nor China are directly affected by the war between Russia and Ukraine, and it could go on without them. So that's a very ambiguous ending. But we have to admit that for the time being, we don't know more. And if there was any kind of agreement, given the sensitivity of the issue to China, it would remain confidential.
And it also sounds like an alarm bell for Europe. Now, lastly, do you expect more meetings between Xi and Trump to take place in the near future?
Well, he's supposed to go to China in April, so he's going to have to show up some results before that. And clearly, what the meeting has opened is a resumption of sectoral talks, of more specialized talks. So there is, in a way, a return to diplomatic engagement. How, when, with what density, we just don't know. And let's remember that Donald Trump pretty often turns over the table at some point and stops processes which he has started, and as using this as a bargaining leverage. So far, I don't think he has scored a real victory against China. On the contrary, I think that China has scored a few hits, but precisely that is something that Donald Trump may be addressing in the near future.
Well, he wrote that book on negotiating, didn't he? François Godement, Special Advisor at Institut Montaigne, was our guest this afternoon. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you to you, and thank you. Hello to your audience.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. Stay with us for more interviews here on TVP World.